Okay, hi there. Welcome to a short revision video where we're going to be looking at the crucial difference between a minimum wage and a living wage. So first of all, what do we mean by a minimum wage? Well, it's a legally enforced minimum hourly rate of pay for all adult workers in the labour market. Indeed, it's against the law for employers to pay workers less than minimum wage. In the UK, the minimum wage is dependent on your age and also whether you're an apprentice. And it's set annually by the government based on recommendations by a body known as the Low Pay Commission. So the government actually just a few months ago published some information about companies that they'd found guilty of not paying the minimum wage, including Tesco and Pizza Hut. According to the figures, Tesco failed to pay about £5 million in wages to just under 80,000 workers, and Pizza Hut missed out on payments of just under £1 million to 10,000 workers. So naming and shaming, I suppose, is one approach to highlight when companies are not paying the legal minimum wage. So how does a living wage differ from a minimum wage? Important difference to understand ahead of assessments. Well, the living wage, or the real living wage, is an hourly rate based on the basic cost of living in the UK, and crucially, it is optional for businesses to choose to pay the living wage to their employees. The living wage is actually calculated by an organisation, a campaigning pressure group called the Living Wage Foundation, so it has no legal grounding, but essentially it's based on the hourly pay in work in a job that they think people need to get by, paying essential bills including housing, rent, food, groceries and utility bills. As of November 2020, the real living wage was perceived to be, or estimated to be, £9.50 across the UK and £10.50 per hour in London, reflecting the higher cost of living in the capital. According to the latest data, Danone, the yogurt maker, became the 7,000th business to start paying the living wage in the UK. A substantial number of employers are implementing a living wage. But there's still a way to go, of course. Not every employer, far from it, is paying the living wage. According to the Living Wage Foundation, data published at the end of March 2021, something like 16% of key workers, including many working in the care sector, and that's just short of 2 million people, are still being paid at or below the living wage in the UK. So there is a gap between the living wage, which is optional for employers to pay, and the minimum wage, which is statutory. It is legal. I think this chart quite neatly shows the range in living wage and minimum wage rates in the UK in the summer of 2020. So check to see the latest figures if you need them using a Google search. Notice there the apprenticeship rate is £4.50 an hour, and the minimum wage for under 18s, which many of you will be studying A-level and IB economics, is £4.55 an hour. So how has the UK minimum wage changed in recent years? It's gone up most years, and in fact it's gone up a little bit more than inflation, and the system has changed over the years. In particular, from 2016 they brought in the adult minimum wage for people aged over 25 and over, and then one for 21 to 24. But you can see over time, minimum wage has now been with us for over 20 years, and the hourly rate has increased quite a bit. In fact, it's increased faster than inflation over time. So why might businesses decide to pay the real living wage to their employees rather than just meet the demands of the minimum wage, which is legal? Lots of good reasons for it. The Living Wage Foundation website has some good case studies you might want to have a look at. One argument is that if you pay people better wages above the minimum wage, you improve employee retention. People stay in their current job for longer, and that can save businesses quite substantial money in terms of the cost of hiring and retraining workers. Paying a higher hourly wage rate might also reduce staff absenteeism, people taking days off work. The opportunity cost of not working goes up if the hourly pay rate is higher. And there's quite good evidence that industrial relationships between trade unions and employers might improve, which brings down the risk of strike action. There's a very interesting theory in economics called efficiency wage theory, which suggests that paying people more per hour can actually cause an increase in productivity, output per person hour. It's partly psychological, in the sense that people are feeling happier and more feeling that their work is more meaningful and getting paid a decent, fair wage, equitable wage for the work they're doing. And of course, if productivity goes up, that can bring down the unit cost of production. There's a wider issue, of course, about reputation. Many businesses see it now as part of their corporate social responsibility to pay the living wage. And I think it's also worth just bringing into the discussion some of the potential wider macro benefits, that if you're paying people better wages, they're earning more if they have a full-time job, and therefore there's less need to claim top-up benefits such as universal credit. So you might be making a contribution towards cutting the scale and depth of working poverty. And of course, if people have more money to spend, they're paying more taxes, but they have more money, more income, they're paying more taxes, and also they have more disposable income to spend, which can add to aggregate demand. Just want to put the rest of this presentation in context with two final charts showing some important information on wages and earnings in the UK. So this chart shows the median hourly earnings per hour for full-time workers in the UK. And you can see that although there was a dip during the recession, a sort of flattening off during the recession from 2008 onwards, the median hourly earnings for full-time workers has risen by almost £8 per hour between 1997 and 2020. So it's just a shade over £15.50 an hour. That's the median, of course. So put the minimum wage and the living wage in the context of that. And the final chart I want to show you in this presentation is really quite interesting. It shows the annual gross pay. It says gross income before deductions and things like income tax and national insurance. So it's the annual gross salary percentiles in the UK. So, for example, reading off the chart, 10% of workers last year in total earned less than £8,700 a year. So, and 10% of workers earn more than £56,000 per year. So if you're on £60,000 a year, you're in the top 10% of workers. If you're earning less than £10,000, you're in the bottom 10%. And clearly there's a huge difference between the average incomes of those in the 80th and 90th percentiles, as that you start to get into the really well-paid jobs. Big gap there of over 13,000%. The quartile, 25th percentile, £16,000 a year. So we know there's a big spread in the gross pay of people in full-time work. And I think the minimum wage is an important legal intervention in the labour market. You've probably studied the arguments for and against it, and you'll be able to analyse and evaluate. But also keep in mind there is something called the living wage, and the living wage is optional. 7,000 employers now pay it, and it's distinctive from the minimum wage, well worth bringing into your economic assignment discussions. Okay, thank you very much for joining in this video.